you record the collegium, Steve?
We tried to do that. Which collegium? The one that we just did?
Yeah.
I think we did, and
Okay.
we took notes, and we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
we're working on, but we had some technology problems with Alan's machine with you guys on Saturday, and we're slowly learning how to. If you imagine two, do you know what a Venn diagram is for sure? But there is the space that everybody's used to, which is the on-site space. So that's one circle. And then there's another circle over here that's been detached, which is the online circle. What we're trying to do is to create an overlap space that works.
Yeah.
And, it's just a learning curve here, that's all.
Okay.
So, should we get started?
Sure.
All right. Well, I tried to send you a triangle. A couple of us have been drawing triangles again. God forbid, you get in trouble when you start drawing triangles. But did you get that one that I sent you?
About the imaginal educator?
Yeah. So
Hmm.
what the madness there was to try to imagine the three pieces of Maureen and John's activity there of the private self, the relationship to others, and the relationship to life. Anyway, that's the way she talks about it in the chapter that Alan and I worked on. The intentionality is the private self, engagement is what you do with others, and create action in life is what it kind of is, the generative activity. So it occurred to me that maybe an imaginal educator was one formulation, for sure there are many, one formulation of a role where people are trying to be a presence, to be in the being. I don't know how to say this. To express a being in the world. Maybe is about the best I can say that.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if, first of all, if those three points of the triangle strike you as a useful model, could you just take a moment and describe the model and say anything that you see in it, disagree with it, appreciate about it, don't appreciate about it, just any reflections you might have about that triangle?
Uh, well, Steve, I don't have, I'd probably have a little trouble giving a lecture off of it. I was trying to think if I were going to do an imaginal education triangle, what would I put on the 3 points? And I haven't answered that question.
Okay,
myself.
well, it may be premature, and so then let's if that it doesn't uh, contain much insight at this moment, let's move on. So let's actually talk about what you prepared or discovered, or maybe a couple of points. So
Okay.
could you what you presented on Saturday? Maybe you could just briefly in a paragraph or two, just 4 or 5 points of that you discovered that about her chapter that might be worth a note.
And as I mentioned, we'd been talking about, we titled this the interior disciplines of the facilitator. And I had told my colleagues, one resource for that, and I think we could hang the series on the words in the book that Jenkins wrote, would be to use his adaptation of the new religious mode work we did, and it worked out well. But I tend to have hung looser to the Jenkins book than my colleagues, who who did really try to present what John and Maureen were saying in the book in their presentations. I did skim what they said in the book, and it certainly informed what I did. But I can tell you basically what I was after trying to do, Steve, in talking about presence. Gave you a little bit of it, where I said it doesn't really exist, and yet we talk about charisma in people. There's something in certain people that reaches out, and it's an attractor to others. It inspires trust, confidence, sometimes followership. And we tend to say, that person really has charisma. And we sometimes identify it when a person like this enters a room, all heads turn. Or you could talk about it as style. But there's something deeper than that NRM, I think, is trying to get at. And that is for the human of spirit, your knowing and your acting, when they become intensified and focused on the one thing, there's a kind of transparency in the presence that one brings to a group. And I was saying in facilitation, we talk about the facilitator as neutral, but that's not being a neuter. Neutrality is something different from just sort of standing there like a stick in the midst of a group and mechanically following some kind of methods process. So in facilitation, I've been in some facilitations where the facilitator really didn't interact with the group in any meaningful way. It simply said, all right, now I'd like to have you do this. And the next step is this. Now we'll do this. And it didn't work very well, at least in the groups that I was with. So there has to be some kind of interaction between the humanity of the facilitator and the humanity of the group that being worked with. And I think we're getting at presence to some degree there. In our TFM training, I don't know if it's probably been a while since you've been in TFM training, Steve, but you will remember from the old days, we used to do this in our pedagogy guilds. When we have people practice their newly learned facilitation methods, we then ask the group, what were the gifts that you saw in Steve's facilitating of this process with us? And usually people will say, well, Steve seemed to more or less follow the ORID method. He listened well. He stood away from the board so we could see the cards. Actions, pretty much. But once in a while, they'll say he had a lot of warmth, or he brought a genuine sense of humor to the activity we were in. And so you're trying to describe something that comes out of what the total complex of what we know when we facilitate, of what we do when we facilitate. And what I was saying is, you're out in that combination, just as the methods communicate a word about life, which is that there's a life process behind these methods. There's also a life stance behind these methods. And that stance is one that says to any group, there's nothing in your past that can keep you from being your greatness. There's nothing in the present situation that can keep you from being your greatness. There's nothing that can happen in the future that can keep you from being your greatness. And people don't generally operate out of that stance. So the reason why we get some of the life-changing events in our facilitation, the reason why people say, wow, we are in a way different place than we were when we started this. How did you do that? And you have to say, I didn't do it. You did it, and the methods helped you do it. But that the presence of the facilitator also, if it's done in depth, brings that transparency to that word about life, or that stance toward the life process. And so it's we say methods and spirit is what we bring to a group. I think that's right. By spirit, I think it's pointing to the spirit in the facilitator, which allows the facilitator to be transparent to something that people in a group can sense. They can't probably, if you ask them, they wouldn't put it this way, but they sense some way of relating to life that's also coming through the methods that helps them do the work they need to do. And I said, otherwise, if, as a facilitator, you could just write up the steps and mail them in, as they say in acting. Well, in this movie, so-and-so just mailed it in.
Just mailed it in? Just talked?
Yeah, he just mailed it in. Yeah, right. And you'll see that sometimes in reviews, but it's sort of actor language to say he didn't really put his being into that role. That it was kind of a mechanical recitation of the lines, so on.
So in a way, it seems like you're drawing an analogy between the place where a facilitator stands and the place where an actor stands when they're fully engaged with whatever is in the play or whatever they're playing. Do I understand that right?
I think there's some parallels there. Otherwise you can read Shakespeare and you can learn a lot by doing that. But then when you see a live performance and you see how this actor has taken Hamlet's role, pulled it through his own life experience, and acting out the role, you see a way of coming at that play, a way of understanding what's happening in life in that play that illuminates aspects of it you never realized before, and may shift your whole understanding of the work as a whole. So yeah, and I think that's why we keep going to see Hamlet. You don't just say, no, I saw that. You go back and see Hamlet with this actor, and you see Hamlet with that actor.
Well, maybe this puts too fine of a point on what you're saying, but is there, how do I want to say this? Is there a character in Shakespeare or Hamlet, or maybe an actor that that reminds you of the role of being a facilitator?
Not a specific one. I mean, I think there are a lot of roles in Shakespeare's plays where people, you could say, well, what he's really doing there is facilitating. But I'd have to think about where those were. I don't have one right at my fingertips, but I have a pretty broad definition of facilitation. So,
Well, it seems like one of the things that an actor does is, in some way, the actor takes the lines, takes the words, takes the conversation, and
right.
really embodies it and brings it present, so to speak, to use your lingo. Are you? Is that kind of what you're trying to get at with the notion of presence and the facilitator?
I think there, I don't want to stretch the analogy too far, but I think there are some relationships. The same thing, was it Michelangelo is supposed to have said about the statue of David. He said, I didn't create that. I just took off pieces of the marble to reveal what was there. I mean, there's a sense of people experiencing transparency to something beyond themselves, and having trouble trying to articulate this to anybody else, but knowing that what they're doing isn't coming out of a conscious, preformed plan. It's in relationship to what they know, the skills they have, and their whole life experience and so on. But then, at times, that intensification of that produces something that pushes beyond to a result that surprises them as much as anybody else.
Well, come at just one angle different. In the way Joe Matthews articulated, I guess, the sense of being a free human being, that you could be lucid, you could be sensitive, you could be exposed, you could be disciplined. If you were to use that language, or try to use that language for showing up and being a presence as a facilitator, does that seem fitting for you? Do those words work in some way? A facilitator is acting out freedom at the front of the room.
Well, I think Joe would say this applies to any human activity where the human being is awake and and a spirit person. So yeah, I would say now not all facilitators would talk about what they do in the same way that I do, but I come out of the ICA tradition, and so the top methods, I think, really do point to a particular kind of depth in human experience. So we have to have some language to point to that at any rate. And it's great that Jenkins did what they did to try to translate what we did in the order into secular terminology that other people, they can come at it from a Buddhist tradition or a Shinto tradition and so on, and should, whatever it is.
Well, it seems to me if we're going to reference the ICA tradition, I think what I just heard you say is presence when a facilitator brings presence or is present in some way as a leader, they bring a sense of they in some way expose the depth conversation at hand, and they have a discipline, an approach to moving things forward with a group. It's a shareable discipline. It's not a arcane private discipline.
I think so. It's not something that only a few people who are specially called can do. On the other hand, it is something that anyone who wants to do with a touch of the profound needs to have some connection to the spirit realm, to spirit discipline, and so on.
You say that word profound with a twinkle in your eye.
I do, yes. I mean, and there are times when I find myself facilitating something, and I'm not trying to be profound. I'm not hoping for a radical life change in the people that I'm working with. But it's, I think, important to know that that's part of where our methods come from and what they were originally shaped and formed in order to achieve. And there's still many times when that's exactly appropriate.
Well, we're running short of time, so I'd like to turn to my last question.
Okay.
And it is towards the future, particularly from the point of view of the Jenkins and chapter on presence and your read of it in relationship to being a facilitator. I'm wondering if you could see, if you see something, maybe you don't, but if you see something that might be a possibility or an opportunity to put in that we haven't thought of before or haven't dealt with before in the course of doing that work on Saturday. Maybe you discovered something or noticed something that might be a nice little hook into the future.
We, at the last top network meeting, Steve, we actually, I think Weigel led a study on that book, early morning study for the top network people. They might ask him that question because he worked on kind of redoing it in a very creative Jim Weigel type charting session that Jim never does anything the same way twice. I'm convinced of.
Well, I'd actually like to ask him that question, but I'd also, if I could just, push you a little bit, not harder,
Okay.
but just invite you to speculate a little bit. Just share a little niggle of something or another that you might have gotten a whiff of.
I touched on it, Steve, but let me elaborate a little more. I think in our... Oh, there's somebody at the door. Hang on.